Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a first look at an upcoming Tier 8 Polish medium tank, the CS-53/56 WOJTEK. And I know I just butchered that final part. Well, it's a Polish medium tank and it's new. It looks really interesting. Personally, I think it's been putting some form of press. It's been squashed. It looks very sleek, quite modern look actually. But what actually are its statistics? Well, they're interesting at the end of the day. We're going to be packing 390 alpha damage, which is we've had a lot of alpha damage creep, especially at tier 8 recently. 390 is becoming a little bit on the lower end. We're seeing a lot of tanks with 320, 340, 360. 390 is a little bit on that lower end now, but it is a medium tank, so 390 is okay in my opinion. Penetration values, 221mm AP standard, that's okay. Not impressive, but it's okay. 252mm gold APCR is slightly better. However, when you think at tier 8, you've got tanks like the 122TM, which packs 300mm heat gold penetration. Yeah, not really a competition there, and it will feel a little bit weak. Those penetration values could do with a little bit of an increase, in my opinion, but at the end of the day, it's workable, and you just have to be aware of what you can and can't pen. Shell velocity values, pretty generic, but actually quite nice. 1267 meters a second. The gold APCR is really quite comfortable, actually. You run through skills to boost that up, and you're pulling up to about 1350, which is going to be lovely. A reload time of 13 seconds, 390 alpha, gives this tank a kind of average DPM. It's not going to be great, let's put it that way, but we'll have a look at that in a second. 2.5 seconds aim time and 0.38 dispersion kind of combined to make an okay gun at tier 8. It's going to be average, and it is not going to be the greatest. There are definitely better gun handling tanks at tier 8, but there are also definitely worse. But for 390 alpha, 2.5 seconds aim time, 0.38 dispersion is going to be okay, but it will begin to struggle, especially at mid to long range, so maybe not the best at sniping. 8 degrees of gun depression is okay, pretty standard for tier 8 mediums, and the mobility is a little bit peculiar. So it's got 50 forwards, 16 in reverse. That's really quite nice. However, is it in practice? Because at the end of the day, we've had a lot of tier 8 medium tanks released recently which go 60 forwards standard. And 50 is just lacking nowadays. And especially when this tank it's not packing the greatest DPM so far. Its penetration values aren't incredible. Its gun handling values aren't incredible. To then see it have kind of average ability. So far, it's not painting a particularly great story, but let's see if that improves. Power to weight ratio is okay, so you are actually going to be able to get up to your top speed and maintain that over most terrains, maybe slightly struggling on soft terrain. HP points, 1300, bang on, standard, average for tier 8 mediums. The armor is okay. 200mm on the turret, 80mm on the hull, looks okay. Because when we look at it in practice, that upper hull is really well angled, and its lower plate really isn't very big. So I think that hull armor on paper is actually going to be quite a lot better than it looks. In practice than it looks on paper. Because I think this is going to kind of be an auto ricochet angle for APCR. However, versus heat, yeah, I think you just wave goodbye to any form of known armor on your hull. And the turret looks kind of okay. It kind of looks like it resembles, a Progetto almost, the Italian medium tanks. But it looks like it's maybe going to be a little bit weak in the areas right, left, right of the gun, and kind of like gun mantlet area. But other than that, I think that turret is going to be pretty strong. It does have a cupola that's located quite far back and is seemingly quite large, but I imagine you could probably hide that quite well by using your gun depression, which is 8 degrees. So it's kind of okay at the end of the day. I think its armor might be a little bit of a redeeming factor here. And it's got the standard Polish medium tank crew of a commander, a gunner, a driver, and a loader. So you can use your CS-53 or your Hurricane, or your CS-52 Lis, or your CS-52 crew tank. So What does that actually mean in terms of comparing it now to some other tier 8 medium tanks that are in the game? So we're going to do a direct comparison between the CS-53 WOJTEK to the CS-52 Lis and the T-34 3. So straight away, in terms of DPM, the WOJTEK has the lowest. 1800 compared to 2086 for the Lis and 1821 for the T-34 3. As I said, its DPM is not going to be particularly impressive or incredible. It is going to kind of sit on that lower end of average for tier 8 mediums, but it's workable. Because at the end of the day, 390 alpha is actually quite nice. It isn't 440 as we have started to see, but it's still definitely workable. And 390 is definitely better than the 320 that this punishes. So this has, in terms of how it can punish peaks, if you can hit your shots. Reload time, it's got the longest, which does contribute definitely to its lowest DPM. So 13 seconds compared to 9.2 compared to 12.85. And then for dispersion values, it sits smack bang in the middle. The CS-52 Lis has 0.35, and that is a well-known, semi-reliable gun at tier 8. It has its moments where it is accurate. It has its moments where it's not accurate, and that is the nature of having 0.35 dispersion. 0.38, which is what the WOJTEK has, will feel notably worse, especially when you cross over that 150 meter, 200 meter range sniping. It will definitely begin to lack. However, it is noticeably going to be better than the T-34 3's 0.4. So it does kind of sit in that awkward range of it's going to be quite comfortable at medium to short range, 0.38, but anything longer than 200 meters and you are going to be struggling. And that's where the Lis's 0.35 is just a little bit comfortable. The aim time, it has the worst aim time, interestingly. However, it does have the longest reload time, so that does kind of mitigate it a little bit. But 2.5 seconds aim time is a little bit lacking nowadays, especially when you compare that to the lovely 2.21 that the Lis has, and then the 2.4 that the T-34 3 has, which does make up for its pretty terrible 0.4 version. Mobility-wise, all three of these tanks go 50 forwards. It's just the WOJTEK, which has lower reverse speed for some reason. 16 in reverse compared to 20 for the Lis and 20 for the T-33. But 50 forwards, as I said, it's okay. It just feels a little bit outdated nowadays, especially when we've seen some tanks coming into the game packing, 55, 60 base. But it's definitely still workable, especially when you run a turbo. Gun depression wise, it actually has the best gun depression. 8 degrees is really quite nice compared to 7 for the Lis and 6.5 for the T3. 8 degrees is that start of being able to actually work a little bit of a ridgeline. It unlocks quite a lot of positions on a lot of maps that you can actually use, and maybe put this tank's interesting for its armor to use. HP pool, the WOJTEK is going to have 1300, same as the Lis. However, both of those have 100 less than the T3, which does have a lovely 40 base. Onto the armor now. So, the Lis and the WOJTEK both have 80mm on the hull. However, I think the WOJTEK, by looking at it, in practice, is actually going to have better hull armor than the Lis. The Lis is less angled, kind of a little bit easier to pen, so I think the WOJTEK is going to have better hull armor than the Lis. However, I don't think it's going to quite stack up to the T-34 3's, which is quite trolly, kind of quite nicely angled as well. However, all three of these tanks' hull armor are just melted by heat. I think they're more going to be semi-reliable against AP-APC. That's kind of the story there. Onto the turret armor. Well, 200mm is going to be quite nice. As I said, I think this thing's turret armor is going to be a little bit funky, and I think in practice it's actually going to be slightly better than 200. It's going to have small spots of 200, and then probably more pushing 250, 260. However, the Lis does struggle with its turret armor because it's really big, really quite flat, and 190mm is not 200 effective. And the T-34 3 kind of has quite nice turret armor. It's only really weak left and right of its gun mantlet, which is a similar story to the WOJTEK, I feel. Penetration values, the WOJTEK is actually going to be winning in this field in terms of standard penetration. 221mm AP compared to 208mm AP Lis and 196 AP 3. 221mm base is going to be quite nice. However, The two tanks that I am comparing it to are well known for having really quite terrible penetration values. 221 is not going to be 250, 240 that a lot of tanks are packing at tier 8 now, especially when we come to look onto this gold ammo of 252 base for the WOJTEK, 252 base for the Lis, and 250mm base for the T-34-3. It's just not the 300mm we are beginning to see tier 8 medium tanks have. Even 280, 290 that they are beginning to pack quite regularly, especially with heat, especially with gold APCR. So this thing's penetration values are definitely going to be pretty average and will begin to hold the tank back, especially when you consider that the WOJTEK doesn't have great dispersion, great aim time, great DPM. So far it's kind of combined to tell a story of what looks to be, unfortunately, a pretty average tank. Nothing particularly jumps out so far and makes me go, oh, yeah, that looks like really good, and that's going to be really fun, and, it just looks balanced at the end of the day, and that's the word I'd use to describe it. Its DPM is average. Its penetration values, average. Its gun handling, average, sits completely middle of the park. Its mobility, average, sits completely middle of the park. Its armor, maybe a little bit of a redeeming factor. However, on paper, it's average. And that is just telling a story to make a very average tank. But I feel could do with a little bit of love before we ever saw this tank released. A slight buff to its penetration values and a slight buff to its gun handling. I don't think would do any harm, and you're not going to see a massively overpowered tank come out of that. It would just be a better, more enjoyable tank to play. As to when we're going to see this tank, I mean, it's literally just come to the Supertest in January 25, so I would not be shocked if we don't see this tank until late 2025. Maybe as part of some kind of Battle Pass collaboration. Maybe it could even be some kind of new tech tree kind of tier 8 premium. I don't really know, but it doesn't look particularly special so far. That's my kind of thoughts on it. Do let me know down in the comments if you agree with me. Do you disagree with me? Do you think it's going to be pretty good fun? And if you just like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all again very soon.